Kara, you've got the polls ready to go then. Okay.
Yep, we're good.
Well, and remind me, because if I get to talking, it starts to really sounding so good, that I forget to pause. Yeah.
One more minute. We are at 1:30, so we'll get started today. Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony McAdoo, Executive Director of the Western Kentucky University Alumni Association. I'd like to welcome you to our Hilltoppers at Work webinar series. This series showcases continuing education, professional development, career management topics for our WKU alumni and friends. Today's webinar is titled Developing a Proactive Work Style and is produced in a partnership between the WKU Alumni Association and WKU Continuing Education and Professional Development. Joining us today on the panel and to serve as moderators and co-host have Derek Olive, Director of Continuing and Professional Development, and Kara Nidell, Program Coordinator for Career and Workforce Development, who will serve as today's moderator. Welcome, Kara.
Well, thank you, Anthony, and thank you guys for joining us today. And we hope that you enjoy today's webinar and find it helpful to your own professional and personal development. If you're looking for professional development or non-credit training for the workforce or yourself in the future, please visit our website at wku.edu/CPD for more information, or you can always just reach out to our office directly. A couple of housekeeping tips for today's webinar. If you've joined us in the past, you're kind of familiar with some of these, but this will be a 1-hour webinar. We will be recording it and posting it to the WKU Alumni Association's website after today's presentation. Also, we will be utilizing the chat function and a poll function for this. So if you have any questions or comments throughout today's webinar, please utilize that chat function. I will be the moderator and looking through your comments and questions as we go, and we will come back to those at the conclusion of the presentation. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Erin Huey, a WKU University Distinguished Professor, as our speaker. In addition to his impressive resume with experience in higher ed, Dr. Huey is a regular speaker and presenter for WKU Continuing and Professional Development Programs. So I will turn the program over to you, Dr. Huey.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Kara. I really appreciate this. Thank you to Derek being here, and especially thank you for Anthony there in Alumni Affairs for help to make these things possible. We really appreciate it. And especially I want to thank everyone who's tuned in to the webinar today. We know that your time is valuable. It seems like all our time is at a premium these days, so we'll try to make the most of the next hour. So thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. We'll be jumping into the content here in just a moment. I do want to kind of follow up on something that Kara said. We do want to make this as interactive an experience as possible. So there's going to be some chat questions that'll show up on the screen from time to time. This will give you an opportunity to kind of give us a little feedback on how you're feeling, what your perspective is, and also share with the other people who are participating in the webinar today. So when we come to those slides, I'll make sure that we kind of reiterate that, and Kara will usually put a poll up on the screen, and therefore we'll give you a little time to respond to that, and then we'll come back and see what your thoughts and thinking are on that. So again, we encourage you to be involved in the webinar today. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the formal presentation. So as we go through the presentation, as we go through the slides, feel free to jot down any questions, comments, anything you might want to ask about later. What we found is that if we start answering too many questions as we're going through the presentation, it can get a little bogged down and we get behind, and then we have to rush through the latter part of the slides, and we don't really want to do that because some of the more applications-oriented information is there. So, but we do want to get to your questions, any feedback you might have. So, like I said, hold on to those until we get to the formal question and answer period at the end. we always like to let people know this is what you signed up for, and so this is what you can expect today. We build the presentation around our learning outcomes, and so we're hopefully that you'll be able to look back at the end of this experience after about an hour or so and realize that we did deliver what was promised. So I always want to kind of start here with first things first. We did a webinar on stress strategies a little bit earlier. In fact, you can find the link to the recorded version of the webinar we did on stress strategies, I believe, at the Alumni Affairs website, as well as the Continuing and Professional Development website there. So we do mention a little bit about stress, but if you want to know a lot more about it and go into a lot more detail, we did a webinar on that. We also did one on communication. We talk about communication in the webinar today. And, in our minds anyway, this all kind of fits together. There is sort of a method to the madness. And so this is kind of a culmination of some things talking about a proactive work style. You'll see some of the elements. If you attended any of the other webinars that we had, you'll see some of the elements of those things interjected here today. But I did want to make you aware of those resources that are out there. Everything we do is available as a recorded. So again, our first chat question here: do you feel like you're in control of your circumstances at work? Just kind of, we'd appreciate it. Just kind of respond to the poll there. We're going to come back to that in just a moment and kind of see where the people who are attending the webinar today kind of feel about that. But this is a question, we all ask ourselves from time to time. There's days when I feel like I'm in complete charge of everything, only to find out I'm not. And then there's days when I find that I'm more in control than I thought I was about things. So just a quick question to the people attending the webinar today. One of the things we're going to focus on here, particularly at the beginning, are going to be 5 areas. When we talk about proactive work style, we were even talking about this a little bit in the pre-conference before we started the webinar. Some things are pretty straightforward. If you sign up for a webinar on stress strategies, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. Stress strategy, communication, motivation. Proactive work style is a little bit more ambiguous to some folks out there. So we kind of wanted to clear that up here at the very beginning and just kind of talk about the outline. This idea of intentionality, how you think, time, communication, and then strengthening the work ethic, which does get at that motivational factor that we talked about earlier. So we'll pop back to you for just a second there, Kara. And the folks that are attending today, they feel like they're in control.
67% say yes, they feel like they are in control.
Okay. Well, see, one of the reasons also, and you can kind of understand this if you're attending here today, one of the reasons we want to ask that question too is because with the advent of COVID-19, there's a lot of folks that formerly felt like they were really on top of things, but they don't as much anymore, simply because there's a lot of variables out there that are sort of outside their control. There's a lot of questions about schools. There's questions about, going out in public. There's questions about a lot of things related to work that we can't know at this point, and the situation is still evolving. But as we'll see, a lot of that as an attitudinal kind of thing. Sometimes people are more in control, sometimes people are not, and sometimes people want to be more in control, and some people are more comfortable saying, well, that's outside my control. So we'll talk about that. Intentionality really comes down to focusing on character, not personality. If you look at the literature, for example, on leadership, for the first several centuries, it was all about, personality. We look at personality characteristics and what does it take? What type of person makes a good leader, for example? And so, we realize that that's important. Your personality is a determinant of everything that you do, but it really comes down to what we mean by this thing called character. Character, is the idea that you focus on principles instead of just circumstances that happen to be at hand. We're going to talk a little bit about proactive thinking. Now, everybody who's attending the webinar today, you can you probably instinctively know what this means. I dwell on a lot of things. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily thinking the way I should be about it, but I sometimes get captured by what am I going to do in this situation? What do I need to do in this situation? So I spend an awful lot of time dwelling on it. And for all of us, it happens at a different time. I find myself dwelling on things, particularly I'm one of those folks at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm staring at the ceiling, dwelling on something. not necessarily thinking about it in a more systematic sort of way. But, a lot of this idea of a proactive work style has to do with the way you think. And as I've talked about in some of the other webinars and most of the training I do, awareness doesn't always lead to action. A lot of us know exactly what we should be doing or how we should be thinking about something, but we just don't. Think about it for just a moment. When was the last time that when somebody told you, well, you just need to not worry about that. Just stop worrying about it. When was the last time you said, okay, I'll stop, no problem at all. I didn't realize, it's not that easy. Even though you probably shouldn't be worrying about something, or that you can't really, worrying isn't going to change the outcome or make a difference. Human beings, we still tend to worry about stuff, and it's kind of in that dwelling category there or whatever. I like this, Bloom's taxonomy. Some of you are probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. There are 6 levels of thinking. It starts at the bottom, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy here a little bit. There's some similarities. We have to remember stuff first. And some of us are really good at remembering things, but that's only going to be beneficial if we understand what it is we remember. And then if we can't apply it, it's not going to make much difference anyway. And we got to be able to analyze it in order to make it better, and then evaluate, and then create. It is a process. The way we think about things really does go from the bottom up. And you can't kind of jump levels on this. You really have to remember what it is you're talking about and remember all the aspects of it, but it doesn't really help if you don't really understand how it all fits together. Some people are really, really good at remembering information, but they're not really good at knowing how to apply that. When I do training a lot at companies and organizations, you have people that sometimes they'll say, well, that's really interesting. That's really good. I appreciate that. I don't really know how I could apply it on my job. Well, when that happens, I probably failed in my role as a trainer, because one of the key elements is always to be able to show people not just insights that's going to make them more enlightened, but we want to show them insights that's going to make them more enlightened that they will know how to use and apply in their job situations. Some of you can relate to this little graphic on the screen here. There have been several times in the past where, I was really close. I was a lot closer than I thought I was to actually achieving whatever outcome or goal that I was wanting, but I decided, well, this is just useless. It's not going to work. Persistence is a really hard characteristic for some people to have. That does relate back to your personality and how you see things and how you do things. And it's the definition changes from person to person. I know a lot of people, and I've known a lot of people that I would consider to be pretty persistent. They take the long view. They don't sacrifice short-term gain for long-term gain, but the self-concept they have is not what I would consider to be persistent about things. They'll try it once. If it doesn't work, they might try it again, and then they give up. If you look at the biographies of people who have accomplished great things, great writers, novelists, the story is pretty much universal. I got rejected 27 times before somebody finally decided to publish my manuscript, and now, I'm winning Pulitzer Prizes and stuff. But, there's going to be an awful lot of rejection out there, and people have to learn to deal with that. But, that's really persistent. If you believe in yourself, you have to be persistent about it. A paradigm, most of us have heard this phrase, a paradigm shift our whole lives. My whole professional life, people have talked about paradigm shifts. And, this term actually didn't come into popular use until around the 1960s. Individual named Thomas Kuhn wrote it in a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and he first talked about the concept of a paradigm. Well, a paradigm is this larger frame of reference. It's the way you see the world. Every one of us, everyone attending this webinar, you have a certain paradigm that you come from. And it's based on how you were raised, your upbringing, all the influences in your life, your culture. I was born and raised in Waverly, Tennessee. I kind of mention that occasionally, a small town in rural West Tennessee. Well, no matter how far I get from Waverly, that's still going to be a part of my worldview and how I see and understand things. Education helps to broaden that, but it doesn't change that. So first of all, people need to understand the paradigm that they're from. A lot of conflict can be avoided if we come to the realization that we don't all see the world in exactly the same way. We see exactly the same things happening, but we don't see it in exactly the same way. There's this idea out there that, we see something and then it comes into our brain and our brain interprets it and tells us what it all means. Well, really what's going on, by the time you become aware of something, your brain has already interpreted that information for you. It's not even a conscious thing. So what you think you see going on is more true to you. It may not be true to the rest of the world, but that's kind of the way it thinks. One of the things we have to remember if we're going to be proactive is that when we go into a meeting, I go into meetings all the time. I was in a meeting earlier today with some of the folks that are in the webinar today, and we all came from a different paradigm. We all came from a different worldview, and we saw things a little bit differently. And that gets frustrating for some of us. We've all been in situations where I cannot believe they don't see it the way I see it. Okay, well, there's a reason for that. Being is seeing. The way we behave has a lot to do with how we interpret things, how we feel things. You can't change the way you see something without changing who you are, in a sense, and that's what makes it a little more difficult and challenging for some folks. Being proactive has everything to do with seeing things from inside out, understanding how people feel, what makes people tick, gives you a better insight into kind of what's going on with them and explains the behaviors that you see that people engage in. If you want to be really effective in interpersonal communications, the focus has to be on the person you're communicating with. It doesn't have to be on you. Stephen Covey talks a lot about, seek first to be understood before seeking to understand, other folks. So you need to kind of understand it is an inside-out approach when we talk about proactive thinking. And I would say several folks are familiar with this little graphic here, Viktor Frankl's gap. People aspire to do the right thing a lot of times. People don't always do the right thing, and there's always kind of an aspirational gap between that. We've all worked with people who didn't come from a proactive point of view. And, we occasionally say things like, well, they're just delusional. They're just kind of out of touch with the reality. But what you need to realize with a lot of folks confuse these two lines. They think they're actually living a certain way when in objective reality, whatever it is, they're not. But you need to understand that's their kind of worldview. They see themselves as being at this level when in fact the people that work with them don't actually see them operating on that level. I might think, for example, I'm the most ethical person in the world. Well, the people who watch my behaviors over time, I can say whatever I want. They're going to be in a better position to judge whether or not I actually act in an ethical manner. I'm going to talk about ethics here in just a moment. So the benefits here, proactive people make choices based on principles and values, not based on personality, based on what's most popular, what's going to give me most prestige. And principles are those things that a lot of people claim to have principles, but then if you watch their behavior, you might be a little fuzzy on exactly what those principles are. My belief is that a lot of folks do have kind of two belief systems. They have kind of a formal belief system and a real belief system. If you walk up to somebody on the street, I wouldn't recommend you necessarily do this, depending on who it is, but ask them what's important to you. What are your values? Well, a lot of people they have it ready. They have it ready to rattle off. Well, I believe in God, country, apple pie, baseball, mom. Honesty, integrity, all those things. So they have a formal belief system of things they really value. But if you were to watch their behavior, you might not see a lot of that reflected in what they actually do. A lot of people who claim that honesty is one of the most important principles they have, but if push comes to shove and looks like I'm going to have to pay a little bit too much income tax this year, I can shave that off just a little bit, because after all, that's not being dishonest. Everybody does it. And they start to rationalize. And so I come to the conclusion that, yeah, you might value honesty, but you don't practice it. So it's not really a guiding principle in your life. Proactive people do use that phrase there, I am responsible for my behavior and the choices I make. Reactive people are always trying to blame somebody else and point the finger. It's not my fault. And, obviously it's kind of like that serenity prayer. There are things out there that you have control over, and there's things that you don't. And you have to be able to distinguish between those two things. If I'm taking responsibility for something that I really have no control over, well, that's bad for me. I'm going to blame myself for something that probably I didn't have anything much to do with. But then again, if something bad happens at work, a bad situation, if my first thought is, am I going to be blamed for this? And I need to figure out quickly how I can avoid being taking any responsibility for this. This is not good. If you're dealing with a problem at work, your first thought should be, how do we solve this problem? Not who can we hold most responsible other than me for it. And if you're like me, I'm pretty sure most of you work with people who I would say their definition of a good day at work. Their definition of a good day at work is to be able to get through 8 hours without being blamed for anything. Okay. You ask them at the end of the day, well, what'd you get accomplished today? Well, that's kind of an abstract question. All I know is they didn't pin anything on me, so I made it through another day. Well, kind of sad in a way, that's kind of a reactive style there. This is your life. This is your time. I'd like this. Occasionally, we have to be reminded of this. I'm one of those folks that I've noticed, and we were talking about this before the webinar started. Things do change over time. Time is more important to me now than it was earlier in my life. When I was an undergraduate, I thought I had all the time in the world and the future was way out there, and who cares about retirement systems, and just pick one, it doesn't really matter. That's going to be decades from now. Okay. Well, then you look up one day and you realize, might want to check on that retirement system and see, did I put enough in? I should have been putting more on. Well, when you think you have plenty of time, when in fact, objective reality might tell you you don't, you come to those realizations at some point. As students, we've all been through that experience where, the paper's not due until the end of the semester. I've known about it since August. It's not due till the first part of December. That means I still have the night before, right? Well, yeah. And, I'm convinced that a lot of students, and I was exactly the same way, are not proactive. They wait till the last minute because they still have time. And then they get so overwhelmed because everything is due at the last minute, and all the papers and all their classes come due at the same time. Now, this is something we've known about for a long time, but we just and at our way of thinking, well, we still have plenty of time. You just never know. When we did the webinar on time management or managing time, self-management, those things, we did talk about, it's important to figure out what's urgent and what's important. If you're spending most of your time on things that aren't urgent and are not important, then you really need to look at your values and how you're spending your time. And I'm a big believer of this. If you want to learn how to be more proactive, you need to sit down, take a pen and a piece of paper and write down some things that you're doing that you probably don't need to do, and they're only important in your mind. There's a lot of things that I still do. I know that I should be spending my time in a more productive way. But I am one of those folks that, I'm sitting here at the computer. I know there's other things that I need to get to, family related things I need to be doing. But, I just need to do one more email, one more email and I'm going to be finished. And, it's like a SpongeBob, suddenly 3 hours later, that one email turned into 26 emails. And I started to get some responses for some of the emails that I responded to. So now I got to respond to them right now. And now I'm starting to get stressed because other things that I need to be doing, well, you see the pattern. That I can't blame anybody for that except me. I have to take responsibility. Well, all these people emailing me, they want a response. Well, that's not their fault, okay? And if I've created a system where I respond immediately to everything and people have come to expect that, that's still my fault. I'm still responsible for that. Communication in the workplace, people need to give some very purposeful thought to who they're communicating, what they're communicating, when they communicate, why they communicate. I would say it's a fair bet that everybody attending this webinar today, you are copied or blind copied on a lot of emails that you have no reason to be copied or blind copied on, simply other than the fact that somebody wanted to cover themselves and make sure if it ever comes up as an issue, I did tell you about this, even though you really have no control over it. We spend an awful lot of time talking to people that really, they are wondering, why are you talking to me about this? You should be talking to, I've got an issue with Kara, so I'm going to spend an hour talking to Derek about it. Well, no, I should probably be talking to Kara about that, proactive communication messages here. The reason we send messages, the reason we communicate with other folks, there's a control element to that. If you're in any type of leadership supervisory role, you have to maintain control. Even if you have the most empowered people in the world, there's still going to be some structure and some order that you're going to have to impose. You're going to have to set up some parameters. A lot of people are not as clear as they think they are, particularly if you're communicating with people that you've worked with for a long time. We have a tendency just to assume that they'll know what we're talking about, so we don't have to go in great detail, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. If you want to see examples of communication that violates everything on this screen, just turn on your TV, turn to any one of the news, information, entertainment channels, and listen to how virtually any politician responds to a direct question that really needs a yes or no answer. It's not going to be clear. It's not going to be concrete. It's not even going to be consistent over time, and it's really not going to connect with anybody. It's not going to connect with reality a lot of times. People expect you to be consistent. If Anthony there tells me something one day, I ask him a question, and then the next day he tells me something a little bit different, or it's not consistent with what he told me before. Well, I come to one of two conclusions: either he doesn't know what he's doing, or he's lying to me about something. And in any event, my assessment of his credibility goes down. So, if the circumstances do change, then you need to be willing to change with those circumstances. But if the circumstances haven't changed and you're just responding on how you feel at the moment, well, yesterday I was in a good mood, so I said yes. Today I'm not in quite a good mood, so I'm not going to say let them do it today. That's kind of stuff that gets on people's nerves and is not associated with proactive thinking about stuff. Proactive thinking and decision making, you have to be somewhat open-minded. That doesn't mean everything goes. I engage all the time with people who I disagree with vehemently, but at least when I talk to them, I'm willing to hear them out. I'm willing to listen to their point of view. And a lot of people don't do that. It's innovative. Some of you have been in problem-solving meetings with your coworkers, and you've all come to the conclusion that, what we're doing is not working. Okay, we need to do something different. And so you spend an hour and a half brainstorming what we could be doing differently. So we can't seem to agree on it. And this is just as sure as clockwork. Eventually somebody in that group will say, well, since we can't agree on what we should be doing instead of what we're currently, let's just go back to doing it the way we've been doing it before. Even though we don't like it, at least we all agree on it, which is the antithesis of innovative thinking. You've got to be persistent and patient. You've got to be able to follow through. You've got to be flexible. Proactive thinkers, they realize that there's a plan A, but there's also potentially a plan B and a plan C. And as soon as you implement plan A, you may have to make some revisions to it. You got to be flexible. You got to be resourceful. Some people are just extreme. They think in that resourceful kind of way. I put that in the proactive category. Some folks, even probably some folks attending this webinar today, you're idea people. You're really, really good at coming up with ideas. We need idea people. We also need people that can take those ideas and say, here's what it's going to take to make that idea a reality. And some people just think that way. I've been in a lot of meetings where somebody said, why don't we do this? And this would solve all our problems. And somebody else goes, do you realize how many resources it's going to take to do that? How much money that's going to cost? How much time? Because their minds immediately go to how this is going to be executed. And you need people like that. You certainly need people that are creative. Creative people are kind of interesting to me. We need creative people. We don't need all creative people. We need some folks that are willing to implement what the creative people come up with. And that doesn't make them second-class citizens, but creativity without having people that can turn your vision into a reality is not going to be helpful very much. And then approachable. If you're proactive, people don't have to sit around and, well, okay, I need to talk to Anthony about something. I know how Anthony is, so I need to word this just right. I need to catch him at just the right time. The more people have to go through that kind of thing, the less approachable you are. And the sad thing is a lot of people, if you ask them point blank, Derek, do you think you're approachable? Yeah, anybody can come talk to me about anything. Well, that may be true. And with Derek, I found that to be the case. But I've also worked with people that thought they were approachable. So I went in, if you're having a problem, you can come in and talk to me. My door is always open. There's nothing that we can't, nothing we can't figure out together. So if you have an issue, come and talk to me about it. Okay, that makes me feel pretty good. So the first time I walk into their office, say, listen, I got a problem. What do you mean you got a problem? I ain't got time. Don't be bringing me problems. I got stuff to do here. okay, where's the person that told me that if I had a problem, come in and talk to? Well, not now. Okay. That's not a good time. If you see yourself as being approachable, find somebody that can be honest with you and ask them if you are really approachable. And it could be an eye-opening experience. I'm not saying you're not, but, kind of keeping that. And you got to be self-confident. We like people who are self-confident. Kara, self-confident, like her. If Kara was egotistical, I wouldn't like her as much. Okay. We like people to be confident about, their knowledge and skills and abilities. If you're in a leadership role, you need to be, projecting confidence. You don't need to be projecting egotism. We like people that are confident. We don't like people that we think are full of themselves. Okay. If I'd started this webinar today saying, okay, everything you thought you knew about being proactive at work is probably wrong. You're just stupid. Okay. If you just listen to everything I say today, I will tell you exactly how to be proactive at work. So first of all, forget everything you thought you knew you're wrong. I'm the all end all expert. I work at the big university. Just listen. In fact, if it looks like I'm just talking off the top of my head, you might want to write that down because I don't say anything that's not significant. Okay. I'm going to say things during this webinar. If you just take it to heart, it'll change your life. Okay. Well, I would venture to say most of the people who tuned into the webinar would rather say they'd not even tune out at that point, but certainly you'd be very skeptical. You wouldn't like me very much. And if you don't like me, you're not going to listen to me because you'd be saying that Huey guy's full of himself. Well, you want me to be confident in the information I'm going to provide and the way I provide it. You don't want me to seem like everybody else is stupid and I'm the only one that has insights into reality that God obviously, spared everybody else. So, that's a very important kind of part of this. We got to take the initiative in communication. If you got a problem with somebody, go talk to them. I've had people come to me over the years that had huge problems with something I said or did or whatever. If they had not come and talked to me about it, I would probably still be doing the thing that was ticking them off because they didn't take the initiative. Some people wait for the opportune moment. Let's say that I have an issue with Derek. And so, I need to talk to Derek about that, but I'll wait for him to kind of come to me and ask me a question about something. So Derek wanders in one day. He goes, Erin, you know what time it is? Derek, I'm glad you're here. There's something I need to talk to you about. Okay. Well, what Derek learns is don't go ask Erin what time it is because he'll jump on you. Okay. So I'm the one with the issue and it's not Derek's not his fault. I need to seek him out and go, Derek, can I talk to you about this for just a minute? Got something, happened the other day at the meeting one. That's what we need to be doing. And you'd be surprised with the number of people who wait for that opportune moment to do things and it never happens. All these things are very important. I like Mary Kay Ash there. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. Without making a list, I could probably, this COVID-19 thing, the people I work with, I could probably tell you who's in each one of those categories based on, what I've seen over the last couple of months. But all these things are important. If you want to be more proactive in your work life, in your career, all those things, you got to have some kind of career plan. Now, you got to be willing to modify that career plan. I am doing nothing like what I thought I would be doing at 18. I had a plan, but then life hit, relationships hit, interests hit. I got more enlightened. I found out that what I thought I wanted to do with my life wasn't exactly how it was depicted on TV or in the movies. So, I might need to have some reality there or whatever. Spot opportunities, potential improvements. If you think, very few people I know, if any, have arrived. So if you're one of those folks that you've arrived, there's nothing left to learn, know, whatever, well, congratulations. But that's not me. I'm still looking for opportunities. I'm still kind of improving. I'm still trying to be persistent. I know Kara and Derek and probably even Anthony at this point can tell you, I can be obnoxious when I'm persistent about something, and I understand that. I'm self-aware, but if I believe in something strongly, I just push and they tell me, no, we're not going to do this. And I'll say, okay, I understand. And then a day or two later, I'm back pushing because, I still believe it. I have occasionally been told to shut up about stuff. Okay. Maybe I pushed it a little bit too far. But it's important to be, if you don't believe in yourself, don't expect anybody else to believe in it. And again, we talked about this in one of the other webinars. You got to be balanced. if you spend all your time on work-related stuff and you neglect your family, you're eventually going to have work-related problems, okay? And some of you know what we're talking about. You've got to find balance there or whatever. I always find it interesting, people to say, you just got to take more risks. Well, there are people out there that probably shouldn't take any risks, okay, because they don't know how to take a calculated risk about things. And these are good questions to ask yourself. What's the biggest risk you ever took? That's very revealing about you, probably to yourself, and risk that you regret not taking. We all have things that, I didn't realize that moment in my life. I should have kind of capitalized on that, but I was taking the safe route or whatever. Nothing wrong with a safe route. If you got an income these days, that's a pretty good thing to be. Probably not the best time right now in the middle of COVID-19 to go follow your dreams. Okay, you need to keep those dreams and don't get rid of them, but there's opportunities there. I tell our students who are graduating, we had a bunch of students graduating in May. We got a few more graduating in August. They are rightly very concerned about the job market and the interview process. Well, the reality is what it is. A lot of things are happening by Zoom these days. People are doing interviews. Had a student the other day that did an all-day on-campus interview via Zoom. They sat in their apartment and visited the campus, got taken on a tour, actually got offered and took a job. So things are different these days. Talk about a risk. I just accepted a job opportunity at a campus I've never visited. I've seen these people on a small screen, but all things considered, this was the best possible way that we could do it. Healthy risk. Take a risk to improve yourself. To improve your commitment. You got to be careful about self-disclosure about things, but very important. Chat question: do you feel your work ethic is better or worse than that of your coworkers? Now, we're not going to track you down and do contract tracing and find out who you are, that kind of thing. But just, if you had to say, do you feel like your work ethic is better or worse than that of your coworkers? Spend a couple of minutes there, think about it, and then respond to the poll there. I occasionally get accused of thinking my work ethic is better than some of the people I work with, and that may or may not be true. But people complain about things that I don't really complain about, and maybe that's a different definitional kind of thing. But strengthening your work ethic. Howard Gardner, the multiple intelligences guy, engagement, excellence, and ethics. The characteristic of a great work ethic, you're reliable. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. There are people that I've had in my life that if they told me they were going to do something and they didn't do it, I would probably start calling the emergency rooms in most of the hospitals in the area, because that would be the only reason they didn't get to it. I mean, they were absolutely reliable. I've got other people in my life and over the years who, if they told me they'd get to it, I'll believe it when I see it, okay? Because they're not very reliable about things. They're dedicated, they're very productive. Now, productivity is an interesting thing because, some days it's not evident. There's some projects that you're involved with that you're working very, very hard, but to the outside world, not looking like much is going on, but eventually pays off. So productivity is not being seen by other people kind of thing. Whether or not you're productive or not. You're cooperative. Doesn't mean you go along with everything, but you are seen as being cooperative about stuff. And people look at your character as being indicative of your work ethic, meaning that, if I do a job reference for you and they ask me, well, how's their character? Well, they'll do a really good job for you. And I think, they're a really hard worker. Now, if you want somebody that's going to be honest, you might want to look for somebody else. But, and most of the time they're really, no, we associate that with a part of their character. So, Kara, we got people out there. How are they feeling about their work ethic?
We are 100% feel like we are better than our coworkers.
Oh, and that could very well be true. After all, there's a lot of people out there that aren't in this webinar today. Okay, they got other things to do, probably of a personal nature, but they're not taking time for self-improvement and this kind of stuff. I'm being a little facetious, okay? But that is a button with me. We all have our buttons out there. When some of my colleagues over the years, they'll say, well, I just got so much going on, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to that. There's times when I want to look at them and say, can I see a list maybe of everything you got going on? Because from my vantage point, I'm really not seeing it. One of the things I wanted to mention, there really are no shortcuts. All these things we're talking about, to some extent, either you're reliable or you're not. Either you're dedicated or you're not. Either you're productive or you're not. Either you're cooperative or you're not. Either you have character or you don't. Now, that's kind of a black and white, yes or no kind of thing, but it always makes me feel kind of interesting when you ask them, well, can I rely on you? Well, most of the time, we just don't tend to respond that way or whatever. And there's a lot of obstacles out there, the ethical leadership, lack of organizational complexity. That one can work both ways. There are organizations, though, that make it pretty easy for someone who's not ethical to exist in that, because the way things are set up. There's not any checks and balances. In a complex organization, there's going to be some checks and balances. There's going to be things that will kind of balance other things. And if you don't have those checkpoints, it's going to be difficult. Lack of support from middle leaders. If you're in middle management, you have the most difficult job in any organization. The people that report to you want you to be their advocate. The people you report to want you to be their advocate. And that's all fine and good unless everything aren't lined up. If the people up here have a different idea about than the people down here, both groups want to expect you to be supporting for them. If the people who report to me come and tell me they're really upset about something, and they want me to pass it on to the people above me, and the people above me, they aren't upset about it at all. In fact, they kind of like it. People will figure out pretty quickly where my allegiances are, to the top or to the bottom. And if you try to you try to kind of play both sides, usually that ends up getting you in trouble too. Lack of appreciation of people. I've been at a lot of companies where they say, people are our most appreciable asset. It's the people that make this company a great company. And if they don't like it, we'll get rid of them and get more people, because we're a people company, Well, they send mixed messages. I actually walked into a break room at a company one time, and, there was a big thing up on the wall talking about the importance of people. And I asked the people sitting in the break room, well, I see they value people here. And everybody kind of start clearing their throat and, laughing and talking under their breath. They probably didn't feel they were the most important asset in that company. Lack of clear accountability. Nothing gets people more frustrated than, bad things happening and nothing bad ever happening to the people who are doing the bad things. If you go into a job and you're a ball of fire, you want to do all the right things, and you start looking around, nobody else here is working as hard as I am, and nothing bad ever happens to them. People that are doing a really good job, going above and beyond, nothing good ever happens to them. Why am I killing myself? Now some people will do a good job just because it's them. Some people, it's very situational. In fact, if you go in and you're doing a really, really good job, you're being proactive, and you're making somebody else look bad, then you're probably going to have some enemies there that you're going to have to deal with. Lack of clear vision and ethical standards. People know I can work with you. Anybody attending this webinar, you could work with somebody for a week or two, and you pretty much know whether or not they know what they're doing. Do they have ethical standards? Those things. You want to be the role model. You want to be the person that people look at and go, you need to be more like Kara. Okay. You want to be able to be trusted, respected. You want to be seen as being a good team player. If you're doing those things, you're contributing to a good work culture. Self-respect, simply the right way to go, the right thing to do. So a short guide here. If you're proactive, you're able to predict. You're not going to be perfect all the time, but you're always thinking ahead. Proactive people, they do get caught by surprise, but very rarely. If you're reactive to everything is a surprise to you. You don't want to become complacent, but you do want to get a sense of, okay, where is this headed? And there are people that are good at this. We've got people in my department that they're pretty good at, I'm not sure where they get it, but they're pretty good at thinking how things are going to be. They're doing preventative types of things. The best way to deal with a problem is before it occurs. And you got to be able to sense. If your job entails, all you're doing in your job all day long is putting out fires, you don't really have a time to spend a lot of time to devote to preventing things. So you want to be able to prevent things from happening. And again, that comes with a kind of a second sense that you develop. Some people are good at that. You map out a plan. They know, what the problems are. Got a plan. We've gone over this in virtually every webinar we've had. You got to have some kind of plan. You got to be willing to modify that plan, but you've got to have a plan in order to go to the future, and you got to tie your day-to-day behaviors to that plan. You got to participate. Proactive people aren't just sitting back and watching other people and trying to figure out what's going on. They got to get involved. Now, there's different ways to get engaged. Introverts can be very involved. They just do it in a different way than extroverts, but you've got to be a part of the process. It's kind of like the people that, I'm just not going to vote. Well, you're part of the problem. I don't like the choices. Well, you're still part of the problem. You need to participate in the process, make a statement, and you need to perform. Nothing speaks to your reputation as a proactive worker, as a good employee, as someone we want to promote. You want to always be on the short list. We're going to have an opening come up. So-and-so is going to be leaving, retiring. You want to be the first name that pops into somebody's mind if, in fact, you want to kind of move ahead. And everything is very purposeful. You've got to realize it's important to pay your dues. One of the things that I occasionally talk with my graduate students about is I think sometimes they forget that. Well, I'm going to leave here with a master's degree. I want to start at the top. I want to be a director of a department and make $80,000. Well, let's talk about getting you there at some point, okay? If you do a really good job at what you're asked to do at any level, that will get noticed. I was telling my son one time, he had the bottom job, and back when he worked in a restaurant, and he thought it was kind of a crap job. I'm not even clearing tables. I'm the one in the back washing everything off. So why would I want to do a good job? Well, because if you don't do a good job, you'll always be in the back room cleaning those things off till they can figure out a way to get rid of you. But if you do a really good job at what they ask you to do, eventually that will get noticed and they'll be asking you to do other things. Okay, that's how it works. You get hired as an admissions counselor. You want to be director of admissions, do the best job possible as an admissions counselor, and that will eventually get noticed. Okay. So, do you think you have a proactive work style? Another chat question here. Just you think about yourself. All the stuff we've talked about in this webinar, all things gone over, is that you? Do you think you have a proactive work style? Well, hold on to that once you've answered that, because we're gonna come back to that in a moment. But if you've participated in any webinar that I've done over the last few weeks, you've seen this graphic here. Quiz time. We did it at the end this time instead of the beginning. Trying to be a little innovative here about how we do things. Down the left-hand side of that piece of paper, I want you to number 1 through 25. And don't worry, we're not going to ask you to do anything too taxing. But down the left, any piece of paper will do, notebook paper, typing paper, back of an envelope, whatever. Just number 1 through 25. Give everybody a chance to do that. 1 through 25. And we're going to ask you to use this scale to kind of rate yourself on each one of those items. So I'm going to put some things on the screen relatively quickly. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here. 1, not at all. 5, that's you. You do that all the time, okay? So 1 to 25, down the left-hand side. And I think I put the scale on all the, so in case you forget, I think I put it at the top of all the slides. So number 1, do you respond to emails promptly? That doesn't mean that you sit on your email and you're sitting in meetings when you should be listening to the meeting, responding to your email, but do you feel like you respond to them promptly? In a reasonable, a realistic manner. Number 2, do you respond to phone calls quickly? I have to work on that one. I respond to emails faster than I respond to phone calls, and people would think it'd be just the opposite. But, I do make it a priority to respond to reference calls. If one of my students is trying to find a job, that's top of the list for me. I always get to reference calls and emails pretty quickly because I'd like for them to get a job. If my students get a job, I have benefits from that too. When I'm recruiting people, do students coming out of your program get a job? Yes. Yes, that's the most powerful marketing in the world, so I tend to respond to phone calls quickly. Do you address requests and complaints swiftly? So when I ask Anthony something, I say, okay, I asked him. It'll probably be next week before he gets back to me, which, in your mind, and however you choose to define it, do you address requests and complaints swiftly? I know people that if you complain, that you can't find them for a while, Do you have a to-do list? And I know there's a scale here. Most people would say they're yes or no, but I have to-do lists for certain things. I don't have to-do lists for others. But do you have a to-do list? And I would say a 5 would mean yes, you live by your to-do list. I worked with a coworker one time that every time he'd get 3 or 4 things done on his to-do list, he'd write a new to-do list, so it'd be nice and neat. Do you prioritize tasks? Do you work on things that are urgent and important, or you just work on the next thing that pops up? I sometimes spend too much time on things that aren't, I should be spending my time on other things, but it's what I want to do at the moment. Do you develop your efficiency methods? This is going to be different for each one of you. Each one of you has a different way of being efficient. Have you seriously worked on how to be more efficient? I keep being told, I've set up a lot of things to be paid automatically online. I have to spend, a lot less time writing checks and stuff. So I could probably work on that, but then that's that basic distrust of technology. Do you manage your calendar? Or does your calendar manage you? You know the difference, okay? Do you honor your commitments? Hopefully this shouldn't be a tough one. I'm not always perfect about this. Now, sometimes I forget. Sometimes I have to call the person back and say, I know I said I'd have it to you by Friday, but it's probably going to be Monday. Is that okay? Do you anticipate and solve problems? Are you good at anticipating things and solving problems as soon as they occur? Again, just rating yourself. We're not going to come there and check your accuracy. And this is a self-concept kind of thing. Do you feel like you anticipate and solve problems? Do you have a routine for how you work? We're not saying that you're boring and in a rut, but most of us do whether we have a routine. I'm not nearly as productive as I was at the beginning of this year because my routine got, as probably you did too, my routine got completely, uprooted. And I don't work as well from the dining room table as I do from my office, okay? So, but I try to have a routine. Do you work well with others? Now, be honest, I think I get along with everybody, said the person who other people can't stand, okay? So try to be honest about that one. Do you work well with others? And some people are just honest. They no, I don't. I'd rather do this on my own. Do you follow up? I've known people that work in management positions that they had a problem with their employees. They shoot off an email and think it's been dealt with. Well, took care of that. Well, no, not if you don't follow up. If you and I come to an agreement and Derek agrees he's going to try to be a little more conscientious to come to work on time every morning. He said he would. So, I guess I'll just, I need to follow up occasionally, Do you don't overcommit yourself? This is one I score low on. My usual response to anything, and the people on this webinar here, if you know me, I'll just say yes, I can do it. The next thing you know, I'm supposed to be at 2 places at the same time, and do you adapt well to change? Again, rate yourself. Sometimes I think I adapt better to change than I actually do. You could talk to my family about that. Do you use autoresponders? Do you set up a system on your email, for example, that if you're not there, you're going to be delayed, it lets me know that, Do you have a system, this is all the rage with a lot of offices and departments. You call in, you don't actually get a person, you get an autoresponder that tells you. Good and bad on both of these things. Do you provide timely updates? To the thing, you're responsible for a lot of things in your job. Do you keep people informed? Or the people you work for constantly wondering where you're at? Where are you at? I wonder where Anthony's at on this project. He hadn't said anything, and that's usually not a good sign, you know. Do you act on feedback? Erin, when you do training, you don't need to preach so much, okay? You know, you need to be more interactive and let people ask questions and have a discussion. Yeah, I know, but I like to preach. Okay, yeah. Okay. Do you manage your time well? In your estimation, do you do a pretty good job? Well, you know, if I just get up at 3 a.m., I'd have a little more time to work, and that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. Well, that never happens, okay? Do you meet deadlines? You know, are deadlines to you, are they deadlines? Or are they more like suggestions, you know? Do you plan ahead? Do you plan ahead? No, I want every day to be an adventure. Okay, well, if you don't plan ahead, it will. By the way, it'll still be an adventure if you do plan ahead, but, you know, it's good to have a plan. Or what's going to happen if plan A doesn't work? What do you mean? That's negative thinking. No, it's not. It's realistic thinking. And I've known people that come back with that very response. What's plan B? If the textbook doesn't show up in the mail, well, I could always guess and get it online, even though I don't know how to do that. Okay. Do you work to improve your work processes? Are you constantly thinking, okay, the next time I do this, I've thought of 3 things I'm going to do that make it a little bit better? I am pretty good about this one. I think, you know, I do something once and I'm, okay, that didn't go so well. I need to change that next time. Are you constantly learning new skills? You know, I do a lot of training with people at companies. I'm convinced they don't want to learn anything new because that takes effort. They thought they'd just be able to learn the job 25 years ago and coast, you know, for the next 2.5 decades. Do you participate actively at work? Yeah. Yeah. Do you interject yourself into conversation sometimes because you overhear something that you know something about and you want to participate? Do you learn from your mistakes? Okay. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it takes a few mistakes, sometimes the same one, to help me get the lesson. And do you network? As I tell my students all the time, and everybody that's working at companies and organizations, you know, it's who you know, it's who knows you. It's networking is important. You know, I mean, I don't have to know everything, but I know people that do. You know, there's lots of stuff that I'm not an expert on, but I know Anthony is, so I can always call up Anthony, and you know, he can tell me. Now, add up your score, get a total. Hopefully we won't run too long. I apologize for that. So add up, you get a total. You know, I used to have a joke that I would tell when I do face-to-face training that if you need to slip off your shoes and socks, that's understandable. But apparently nobody gets that anymore. Okay, so, you know, my grandparents did. Okay, if your total is between 100 and 125, you are proactive, okay? You are there. In fact, you should probably be doing this webinar instead of me. So 75 to 99, keep going. You're getting there. You got a few things you need to work on. You kind of look back over those items you rated yourself lower on, and you'll kind of get there. Now, if you're below 75, you're probably reactive, okay? You know, and so just need to think about that a little bit. Now, this is not the of-all, end-all of discussion. This is kind of just, as I tell folks, take everything with a grain of salt. But this does kind of give you some sense of that. So, Kara, before we did this whole exercise, I think we asked people what they thought. Okay, breaks it down there, about 50-50. About 50% said they thought they had a proactive work style. 50% said they weren't sure. But, you know, this should give you a little bit more evidence whether or not you do or you don't. And again, be a little bit facetious here. If you're below 75, you probably need to work on a few things. And if you scored 125 on this, we might want to go back to that ethics section a little bit or whatever, because you're probably perfect. And, you know, I'm always suspect of perfect. You know, I really admire people who are searching for the truth. I think that's an admirable quest. I'm always a little skeptical of people who claim they found it. Truth with a capital T, I know what it is, and I'll tell you if you want me to. Again, we're coming up against the time here or whatever, but I did want to leave a little bit here. Proactive is a lot of things. I think we've covered a lot of things that was there. So if we do have any questions or comments, maybe we can stay here, a few more minutes to do that. I do have some resources for you that I always put at the end of these presentations. I'll mention those in just a moment. But do we have any questions, Kara, that maybe have come in?
Not yet. Let's go ahead. If you have any questions, utilize that chat function. But for now, we'll let, in the sake of time, we'll let you go ahead and talk about the resources.
Yeah, I appreciate Kara. She keeps an eye on that. I have a hard time multitasking. I don't know whether that's proactive or not, but it's hard for me to watch a screen and watch the chat function and all things. So I really appreciate having her help with these things. But we did put together some articles. So if you want to know more about this proactive thing and how to use that and how it affects your career and life and everything, there's 4 articles there that I think you'll find very interesting. All of these you can download directly from the internet. They're all PDF files. All you have to do is click on the link, and really good information. It goes into a lot more elaboration as the things we talked about here in the webinar. And then some videos, the visual learners, even though some of my colleagues in psychology tell me the whole learning styles thing is suspect, but I know there's visual learners out there, okay? There's auditory learners. We can all learn, and we all have preferences. So if you like to see things, about being proactive, we've got 4 videos here for you. We try to make these so that they're usually of that TED Talk variety, 10, 15 minutes. I'm not going to direct you to a 2-hour video, somebody doing a major presentation at a conference on being proactive. But, a couple things here that deal with being more proactive in their personal life. But most of these are really focused on work situations and, what it takes to be a proactive professional. This does pay off for you, I think, in your career and pays off immediately. If you have the reputation of being someone who's proactive, you're gonna be seen as the person people think of when they want to know. Then again, there's a downside to everything. If I know Anthony always does a good job, always comes through, he's the first person I think of for any time we have a new project that comes open in our department. Well, next thing you know, Anthony's got 9 projects going, and some of the other folks have nothing because I can't really depend on them as much. Eventually, Anthony is going to get a little burned out, and I said, Erin, I really appreciate the fact that you think I do a good job, but can you spread this out a little bit more, get some of these other folks to do some things too. But, if you're the first person people think of when they've got an important job that needs to be done, I'm hoping Derek there, he sees a company, we need to make a really good first impression. So we're going to send, we need to send a trainer down there that's going to make them want more. I want him to think of me. I'm not sure he always does or probably should, but given the topic or whatever, that you want to be the first person that pops up. I don't want Derek going, well, this is important. The last thing we need to do is send Erin down there. Okay. We probably won't get any more training forever. I don't want to have that reputation. Okay. So anything, Kara?
I actually have one that I'll throw in here. And we have a couple of different comments that kind of go along this same way, but say forward, in the middle section of that quiz, do you have any tips to increase your proactive abilities, I guess?
Well, my thing is, it's not a specific piece of advice, but you have to be purposeful about this. A lot of people, it comes back to that slide. I don't think I included that slide in this presentation, but I have a slide that says awareness doesn't always lead to action. That's the thing that most of us have a hard time with. I know I need to respond quicker to phone calls. I know I need to take deadlines more seriously, and so awareness is there. It's just that ability to follow through and actually be motivated enough and to think it purposefully. People, it's always kind of interesting to me that people will say, well, I know I need to be more time conscious, but I just don't have time to do that. Well, you need to kind of make it, it's not something that you do in addition to everything else you're doing. Most of those things they all kind of fit together. It's something you sort of weave through everything that you do. If you're good at meeting deadlines, which means you're probably also good at following through, which means you're probably also good at marshaling resources. You're good at responding. You're doing all those things. So it's kind of a package. And so the purpose of the quiz was just kind of see where your strengths are. Some of those some of those items, I'm pretty sure, folks, I'm good at that. Well, that's good. That doesn't mean you need to neglect that when you start working on some of those other things, but you do need to be real purposeful about it. And again, I mentioned that, and I kind of belabor that point a little bit because I know folks that think, well, if you just point out the reality, then people will know what to do. It's kind of like we talked about earlier. If you know you need to be more assertive, telling somebody you need to be more assertive without telling them how to go about being more assertive is not really going to be helpful to them. So you really need to reflect on the reasons why you're not good at managing your time, or you're not good at getting back to people, or you're not good at meeting your deadlines, and really have a kind of heart-to-heart with yourself and think about what you could do differently. You know, since we've been on COVID-19, I've actually rearranged the house a little bit because I realized, you know, what I was doing is not working. I'm not being proactive. I'm too disjointed. I got all my stuff in one room. I got some stuff in another room. I got my computers. You know, I need to get a plan here to how I can be more productive. Kind of like I need to find a way to emulate my office. Everything in my office, because I've been there for several years, is exactly where it should be, where I want. I can rock and roll. I can move quickly. Well, you take me out of that environment, I had to rethink everything. So being proactive, I knew what I needed to do, but for the first couple of weeks, I just didn't have the motivation to do it. You know, I thought, well, I ain't got time to sit and make this more effective around here. So I think just being aware of and being purposeful about it more than anything else. You know, I do want to kind of we'll mention at the end here, if anybody does want to follow up with any of this and want to talk to me individually about it, I'm not that hard to find. You know, email at Western or whatever. But if you want to touch base with me and just kind of talk about some of these things, I'll be extremely happy to. I'll get to my email pretty quickly, and I'll try to respond to you in an efficient and effective manner. Okay, if you need to get in touch with me. So, anything else there, Kara?
I think, like I said, for sake of time, we will go ahead and kick it back over to Anthony.
Well,
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Huey, for this great discussion on
Thank
developing
you.
a proactive work style. Managing ourselves is often our toughest task, I think. And
Yes.
the content you shared today is good reminders for everyone on kind of focusing on what matters and keeping yourself in balance so that you can be proactive
Okay.
and not reactive. So,
Okay.
so thank you again for being here today and sharing your
Mhm.
insights with our alumni and friends who joined us.
Mhm.
And to each of them, thank you. If you're watching us on our recording, thank you for joining us there as well. For those that did register and for those that are viewing afterwards, the resources that Dr. Huey highlighted in the slides will be available on the website. For a list of our upcoming webinars, go to alumni.wku.edu, and on our events calendar, you'll always find our upcoming events, including our webinars. Special thanks to you, Kara, for hosting and serving as our moderator today, and the partnership with WKU Continuing Professional Development for this webinar series. Till next time, have a great day. Go Tops.
Thank you. Thank you.